Good afternoon and welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier, and I hope you're staying safe and taking care of yourself and your family. Let me start with some macro thoughts. John Hopkins, which tends to lag a little bit, total confirmed cases 786,228, total deaths 37,820, and we mourn every single death. A V-shaped recovery, as I said a few weeks ago, is simply a fantasy. I keep seeing allusions to the risk of recession. If your definition of recession doesn't tell us we are in one now, you need a new definition. David B. Collum. The number of worldwide flights tracked per day via flight radar and IV_technicals gives you a clear image. And this is what I was saying on the 22nd of March when I said COVID-19 and a rolling sudden stop. We are moving from a world of hyper-connectedness to a world of quarantine. A complete quarantine is the only way to vaccine this 21st century world of ours. Bill Gates' coronavirus has started behaving a lot like the once-in-a-century pathogen we've been worried about, he said. And the price of crude oil, which has slumped precipitously and I think will go even lower, is entirely correlated to the hard stop I'm talking about. This is the price of crude oil as yesterday before the market closed, when we had a late rally on news of a Putin-Trump phone call, what they will achieve in the context of enormous demand and destruction is a mystery. And I said regime implosion coming to a place near you. Oil creates the illusion of a completely changed life, life without work, life for free. Oil is a resource that anesthetizes thought, blurs vision, corrupts. Richard Kapuscinski, in a book called The Shah of Shahs, which is an extraordinary book, well worth reading, about the Shah of Iran. Since oil, above all, is a great temptation, it is the temptation of ease, wealth, strength, fortune, power. It is a filthy, foul-smelling liquid that squirts obligingly up into the air and falls back to earth as a rustling shower of money. But we are not at that moment, we're at this moment, which Hunter S. Thompson described as the edge. There is no honest way to explain it, because the only people who really know where it is are the ones who have gone over. As I said on the 24th of February, the viral moment has arrived, and I was bullish then about gold. At this point, I would venture gold is correlated to the coronavirus, which is set to turn parabolic and is already non-linear and exponential. We hit a new high and then we sold off very badly, but we've recovered nearly 3/4 of that sell-off, and I expect a push into all-time highs later. And therefore, on the 22nd of March, I reiterated my message. I still believe gold will soon turn viral to the upside, and I'm looking for more than $2,000. Gold was last trading at 1615.32. And the Stalwart has a very interesting email yesterday about why gold is beating Bitcoin. Bitcoin currently at 6,400. Home thoughts. This is a lovely photograph from the Solo Wandera from the local fish market with the fishermen coming back for the day, Nouakchott in Mauritania. Khalil Gibran asked to address the matter of talking. You talk when you cease to be at peace with your thoughts, and when you can no longer dwell in the solitude of your heart. You live in your lips, and sound is a diversion and a pastime. And in much of your talking, thinking is half murdered. For thought is a bird of space that in a cage of words may indeed unfold its wings, but cannot fly. Wendell Berry observed that true solitude is found in the wild places where one is without human obligation, the places where one's inner voices become audible. Two brothers were rescued and treated at different NGOs and then reunited. This is from Haven Lust, and what a beautiful short video that is. They were headed into androgenic, systemic, multiplex, seriously bad shit, like she sort of already knew, figured everybody did, except for people who still said it wasn't happening, and those people were mostly expecting the second coming anyway, the peripheral by the great dismal. And that really is the zeitgeist of a time, which is its defining spirit or its mood. And the zeitgeist of 2020 is simply indescribable. Look at the light at the end of the tunnel. When this is over, we will be living in a police state with a collapsed economy, Karl remarks. It certainly feels like a decade of semiotic arousal when everything it seemed was a sign, a harbinger of some future radical disjuncture or cataclysmic upheaval. Political reflections in nearly every country in the world. When the virus reaches 100 people, the number of cases begins to increase by 35% daily. At that rate, a country would reach 1 million cases just 31 days after reaching 100 cases. Keep that in mind, because that's without any social distancing or any mitigation measures, but still, that is the exponential curve. COVID-19 has reached 177 countries. This is from Remy GMI. Everyone needs to stop thinking COVID-19 numbers today are today's numbers. They are not. They reflect a transmission between 12 to 18 days ago, onset and course of illness 7 to 14 days ago, hospitalization and testing 7 to 1 day ago. Strictly, the present is the past. And that's why in the last piece I said we're looking in the rearview mirror when it comes to COVID-19. And therefore the Malcolm Gladwell moment has definitively arrived, but it's much more drastic and dramatic than what we're actually seeing. President Trump and the coronavirus, a terrifying tale of how not to handle a pandemic. In one short video, watch and weep Andrew Neil. And to that point, a reality TV star botched the response to a global pandemic, and now we're all imprisoned in our homes and forced to watch him daily. To announce that there must be no criticism of the president, or that we are to stand by the president, right or wrong, is not only unpatriotic and servile, but it is morally treasonable to the American public. Theodore Roosevelt, via Bill Nye. China's Secretary General Xi Jinping appeared without a mask for the dockside portion of his trip to Zhejiang facility, that's Stephen McDonnell. Returning to the rolling sudden stop about which I spoke and the move from a hyper-connected world back to a quarantine. Look at this: European air traffic, end of March 2019 versus 2020. Alex in the air. And that confirms what I was saying about moving from a world of hyper-connectedness to a world of quarantine. I've been thinking about this a lot, and Hals Rethink put it in a couple of tweets. US intelligence would have known Wuhan's virus history from the start. Moreover, Fort Detrick is watching every bio-threat worldwide, would know, as would its Canadian partner, Winnipeg National Microbiology Laboratory, which had close research ties to Wuhan Level 4 lab. The question is, was the intel just not trusted? Just quietly wondering what was known and by whom and when. This is him again, Hals Rethink. I'm not a virology expert and don't dabble in conspiracy theories, just quietly wondering what was known and by whom and when. And knowing from experience such intel quite possibly never reached the top of decision making. If that's the case, it's mind-boggling. True random sample of folks tested in Iceland shows that 6% are positive. If the US infection rate is 6%, most likely higher, that means that 20 million are already infected in the US. Nuriel. Less than the 50 million of the 16% of the non-random sample of actually tested ones. I've written about the origin of the coronavirus on the 1st of March, and 24th of February I was saying the viral moment has arrived. And COVID-19 has a kind of karmic quality. I saw that video of Dominic Cummings running from 10 Downing Street, and it turns out that he too has been infected. Returning to Xi Jinping without his mask in one fell swoop, Xi Jinping in May 2019 was president for life. And he made a point of saying that he was personally commanding the response to the outbreak, and therefore one has to interpret some of the propaganda in that context. 16th of February, I was quoting that Reddit article, "I know the truth about the coronavirus outbreak. It is far worse than the media are telling you." And indeed, a non-linear and exponential virus represents the greatest risk to a control machine, in point of fact. We go back to that period, Stephen McDonnell was showing us social media posts about the coronavirus being censored in China, the protest art. And the professor was saying, perhaps too, the besieged city of Wuhan, beset as it is by crisis, may also prove to be a Jerusalem, a place of hope and peace, an old city proffering new hope. And they've been collecting urns of their relatives. You will all be no better than fields of garlic chives, giving yourselves up to be harvested by the blade of power time and time again. Then he quoted the Bei Dao's 1976 poem, "The people are no longer fearful. I do not believe." In that Reddit article, he was writing that first it needed a great number of human guinea pigs. There was one more set of doors, and beyond them lay what the corporal called the core. And it was there that I saw it, piles and piles of dead bodies stacked on top of one another. All the way to the ceiling, the corporal led me to the core. I cannot count how many there were, but it was many, many thousands, and in the midst of the piles of corpses was a kind of path, and I heard a roaring sound in the distance. I simply cannot believe what lay at the end of that path in the core. It was an enormous furnace with great fires roaring within. And indeed, around that time, SO2 levels were very elevated, and this is a satellite image of that situation. International markets never imagined I would have to expand the axis on this chart at least until this morning's -70 print on the Dallas Fed Manufacturing Index, McDonough. And that's why the V-shaped recovery is a fantasy. And I saw some Chinese numbers which were stronger, but that's in comparison to the previous month. Let's move on to the currency markets. Euro, dollar, 110.10. Dollar index, 99.33. Japanese yen, 108.29. Swiss franc, 0.9596. The pound, 123.38. The Australian dollar, 0.6189. India rupee, 75.53. South Korean won, 12.1916. Brazilian real still slumping, 51946. Egyptian pound, 15.77. And the rand just close to a record low at 17.97. Dollar index, we've come off since all that liquidity is going to be added to the system. Euro dollar, we're hanging around this 110.12 level. Emerging markets, spreading coronavirus in Brazil. Far-right populist President Bolsonaro says that Brazilians aren't infected by anything even when they fall into a sewer. I remember him saying at Unga, "You shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free." I've previously written about the China EM frontier feedback loop phenomenon. I said this phenomenon was positive for the last 2 decades, but has now undergone a trend reversal. The fallout is being experienced as far away as Germany. The rand is the purest proxy for this phenomenon. African countries heavily dependent on China being the main taker are also at the bleeding edge of this phenomenon. And I said this pressure point will not ease soon, but will continue to intensify. And Robin Brooks says EM investors very rarely sell, but the COVID-19 shock changed all that. We've recorded bigger outflows red than during the global financial crisis. We also estimate far bigger valuation losses on remaining holdings blue, given how much positions have grown in size from 2008 to 2009. And indeed, it is the end of halcyon days. You know the story, Latin Alcyone, daughter of Julius and the wife of Cex. When her husband died in a shipwreck, Alcyone threw herself into the sea, whereupon the gods transformed them both into halcyon birds, kingfishers. When Alcyone made a nest on the beach, waves threatened to destroy it. Julius restrained his winds and kept them calm during 7 days in each year, so she could lay her eggs. These became known as halcyon days, when storms do not occur. Today the term is used to denote a past period that is being remembered for being happy and or successful. Social distancing for our migrant labourers. This is Rana Ayub. And if you want an example of non-linearity and exponential risks, it's the way those labourers are being herded. Sub-Saharan Africa, and it's a moving target, but just to give you a flavour of the propagation. Confirmed COVID-19 cases in Africa increased 15-fold in 15 days. Total number of COVID-19 cases reached 5,553 on 30 March, an increase of 10% on the previous day, yet representing only 0.71% of the total number of cases worldwide. Bill Gates had warned of 10 million deaths as the virus spreads to Africa. Ebola is terrible, but it's not like a lightning flu, he said. Ethiopia bank leaders expressed worries about two emerging issues: possible defaults on overseas payments as forex receipts from exports and remittances decline sharply, and drop in deposits as people withdraw cash in anticipation of uncertainty over COVID-19 disruptions. Ethiopia will contract this year. The negative feedback loop for Africa is double-sided. One side is an overwhelmed healthcare system. The other side is an economy. I wrote about how much do we need to haircut sub-Saharan African remittances, and I was speculating, was it 10%, 20 or 25%? I calculate sub-Saharan Africa will contract in 2020. It would not be an exaggeration to say we're staring into the abyss of a zombie apocalypse. 2nd of March, I was writing about sub-Saharan Africa, and I said the first issue is whether the coronavirus will infect the continent. That has been now answered. We know that the coronavirus is exponential, non-linear, and multiplicative. And what exponential disease propagation looks like in the real world: nothing, nothing, nothing. Cluster, 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 then boom. Zito Kabwe, who's an opposition politician in Tanzania, writes in the Daily Maverick, our government reports show that out of 39,000 visitors who entered the country from COVID-19 affected countries, only 273 were tested. Viruses exhibit non-linear and exponential characteristics. I wrote in the Africa report about debt, virus, and locusts creating a perfect storm for Africa. 27th of January, I was saying I have to assume that the virus is already in Africa, but just not diagnosed, to the point of we're looking in the rearview mirror. In some countries, it's really egregious. Zimbabwe, the presumed lead agency in the fight against coronavirus, an update. The government has done only 194 tests to date, but they've had 2 deaths. If you take the Thomas Puyo model, they've already got 1,600 cases, so they've probably got thousands. I calculate sub-Saharan Africa will contract in 2020. As I said, South African All Shares down 23.95% so far this year. South Africa's Rand slumped to a record low after Moody's cut South Africa to junk. They were the last holdout. Record low, dollar bonds plunged, banking stocks dropped after the country lost its last investment grade rating. Currency dropped as much as 2.5% to 1809. Worst performance among major emerging market currencies after the Mexican peso. 10-year yields on 10-year dollar-denominated bonds climbed 69 basis points to 8.13%, a record, and widening the premium over US Treasuries to 735 basis points. 10-year government bonds opened 60 basis points higher, but erased the increase as additional liquidity measures announced by the country's central bank over the weekend came into play. Banking stocks slid as much as 6.1%, extending Friday's 12% slump. The end state remains unclear, especially as South Africa sinks further into the abyss of recession. Tito Mboweni said on Sunday evening that he may approach the IMF and World Bank for assistance. So it really is a very difficult situation for South Africa, which I've written about severally, and not least on the 9th of December last year when I was saying it was time to big up the dosage of Quaaludes. Ramaphosa, however, is leading from the front. Egyptian pound hanging in there, performing well. EGX 30 down 31.8% so far this year. Nigerian All Share down 20.53% so far this year. GDP could slow to 1.5% and may further worsen in the event of a full lockdown. Ghana's finance minister, which will be a record, the lowest in 31 years. And this is not a unique phenomenon. This is what we're going to hear from everybody. Ghana Stock Exchange is down 4.35%. State says estimated coronavirus cases by mid-April will be 5,000 and rise to 10,000 by the end of April in the absence of any drastic intervention. That curve is considerably flatter than what people have experienced. From January up until early February, the number of pneumonia cases were 137,667, before a dramatic increase to 195,504. Daily Nation. Nairobi All Share is down 22.05% year to date. NSE20 is down 27.26% year to date. Both, in my opinion, are headed lower. Thank you for stopping by.